Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Tom Wells here. Today is Friday, October the 19th, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, your first daily dose of happy for this beautiful Friday. And we are doing a new experiment today. We are not only creating and recording the podcast and broadcasting it live over Spreaker, which can be listened to on the homepage of our website at loatoday.net, but we are also live streaming over Facebook onto the LOA Today page on Facebook. And what we're hoping to do is turn this into a regular thing if this works out the way we want it to. If it works out maybe a little bit better than the way it started out this morning, because it was a little bit tricky getting this thing going this morning for some reason. But this is fun stuff. This is breaking into new areas of the bleeding edge of technology. So, Tom, are your fingers bleeding yet? It's usually a good sign.
Yeah. They're really feeling good.
You're feeling good. Okay, good. So how you been? We haven't talked for a week. How's your week been going?
Oh, it's been quite eventful. A lot of changes going on in my life always lately, and I'm happy. I'm at a good place. I guess I just feel good.
That's a good thing. That's a really good thing. And I've got a splash screen I'm putting up here, so just give me a second. Okay, so we got the splash screen up. My week's been an interesting week. It's been a challenging week in the sense because I'm adding new co-hosts. Wendy Dillard has backed out as one of my co-hosts, and she's off going to be doing her own podcast, actually. But we have new people who have joined us, one of whom is a young man from California named Drew, who goes by the stage name Dark Dry Drew. And and Drew is a stand-up comedian.
Oh, great.
He just graduated from the University of California, Davis, and we had our first conversation, our first podcast yesterday, and it was a good conversation. And we were both realizing this is a rather unique podcast because of the difference in ages between the two of us. So it's like a millennials meet baby boomers kind of a podcast, right?
That could be pretty funny.
It could be. It could be funny, and it could be fun too. Because
totally. Yeah, I have a blast talking to my millennial kids.
Oh, do you? Okay. Well, there you go. Yeah.
Lots of millennials I have in my life. I've had. Yeah.
Well, this is actually kind of a new thing for me. I mean, I have three nephews who are millennials and two nieces, and that's pretty much the extent of my connection to millennials, and I don't even talk to them very often. So
they're by far the funniest generation I've ever run into.
Okay.
They really are. I mean, my son is just like keeps me cracking up.
Constantly. Really? Oh, okay.
He's nonstop. I mean, it's all he does practically is say things that are truly funny.
Cool.
Really funny.
Well, hey, that's good stuff.
They grew up with enough humor in their lives,
right?
From movies and everything. And I guess they're just bringing that fresh energy to the planet too.
Right.
Really nice. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that I was really intrigued by talking to Drew yesterday, Drew gave me the opinion that the millennials, he says, don't really have much in the way of role models compared to earlier generations, which I thought was fascinating. It was a fascinating comment that he made. And we actually talked about it quite a bit after we did the podcast. He pointed out, I mean, who are the role models? I mean, Donald Trump. Not exactly, your most ideal. Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, we all wanted to have a president who thinks that it's great when a congressman body slams a reporter, right? This is a good thing.
And a few other things. A couple other things.
But it was an interesting point. In fact, he was telling me about some people who are doing very well, basically being kind of like podcasters, but doing, video, making videos on YouTube and that kind of thing, who have really made careers for themselves. I mean, there's this one person he mentioned named, I'm going to get his name wrong. I think his last name was Peterson, Jared, something like that. Jordan Peterson, I think it is. He's a professor from Canada, I believe, who initially kind of rose to fame by coming out against some sort of legislation that was being investigated at the time or being proposed at the time. And he has since then, in Drew's words, become kind of a father figure to millennials, doing videos like, when you're out there in the work world, stand up straight, throw your shoulders back, things like that. And I'm thinking, oh, really? Okay. Well, it turns out this guy has a huge following, and he does live talks and presentations at arenas around the country, and gets paid $50 to $60 a ticket. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness. So wow. I guess there is some demand for role models and father figures.
Well, yeah, I actually wanted to always be, in that role of an elder when I got to the age that I am, because I felt, well, that's just what the society needs. It needs the older people to be something for the younger people. And so I always tried to cultivate in myself the ability to be somewhat wise, somewhat available to younger people, because I just thought that's the way the society actually should really run. And, of course, if you don't have genuine wisdom, then it doesn't really go very far. But that's what people need. Young people do need genuinely wise and loving elders that are available to share what they know, unless, it's all hype, and it's not very not worthwhile.
Yep, very true. But it's a fascinating conversation. In fact, next week he and I are going to explore something that's near and dear to his heart. We're going to talk about dating and the law of attraction, and that apparently, according to him, dating is actually almost more difficult for his generation than for prior generations, just because of how the whole societal shift has happened. So it should be fascinating. It should be fun, and we're going to be doing a lot of stuff going forward. It's going to be really good.
That'll be great.
Yeah.
I'm envious. Yeah. I'm going to have to start listening to those podcasts.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, hey, we can even do cross podcasts. We can bring him onto our show, or you join us on the other show or something like that. Yeah.
As long as he's dry and dark and not lighthearted and fun.
Now, actually, he is going to be working on doing the lighthearted type humor. He's avoiding the really absurdist dark humor on our podcast, which is good.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, because we want to keep it.
That was actually his specialty, so he wasn't kidding what he said.
Oh no, that's definitely what he does when he does his stand up. But but he also agrees that we need to have positive entertainment, and that's one of the reasons he was enthusiastic and excited about coming onto the podcast. So
nice.
Yeah.
How'd you find him?
I found him on Facebook. I actually put the word out on Facebook. I was targeting comedians, and I used the law of attraction in there. And I actually I have currently 4 or 5 new co-hosts joining, all of whom are comedians and all of whom have some exposure to the law of attraction.
So you've added that many more podcasts?
No, same number of podcasts. We're going to be having some co-hosts do double, or do two co-hosts on one show kind of a deal.
At once?
Yeah.
That'll be interesting.
So this and one example of that is this coming Sunday, Anne-Marie and I do the Sunday podcast Sunday night, and we're going to be joined by a comedian from, I think he's from Atlanta, named Mark Evans. Really interesting guy, and
cool.
And good presence online, and so on the air rather. So that's going to be fun. We're going to be doing the 3 of us there, and then Tuesdays it's going to be me with a young woman named Alex King and a young man named Carlos, and I always have to check the spelling of his last name. I think it's Balasquito. I always get it wrong. So, Carlos, if you're listening, I apologize. I am going to learn your name. I promise I will. It's just, for whatever reason, your name is just not working in my head yet. But it'll come. It'll come over time. I'll just put a big note on my screen saying Carlos's last name is, and that way I'll always know.
Right. We'll have it down.
And both of them are really interesting people. Alex actually has Asperger's syndrome. And she's a recluse as a result. She's a woman of color. She is agoraphobic, so she spends most of her time at home. But she's a really nice, sweet, well-spoken woman. And she actually sat in Patty
She's
Framo.
A comedian?
Yeah, these are all comedians, all people who are pursuing careers as comedians.
That's great.
Yeah. Now the Patty Framo does the Monday podcast with me, and interestingly enough, I interviewed Alex about a half hour before that podcast. And then as soon as I got off the phone with Alex, like a minute later, I got a text from Patty saying that she had just flown in. She lives in San Diego. She had just flown in from San Francisco and was feeling really rough, really not feeling well at all, and didn't feel like she was up to doing the podcast. And I just finished talking to Alex. So I said, I'll call Alex back. So I called Alex back. I said, hey, something strange has come up. Patty, who normally does the Monday show with me, can't do it. Any chance you want to step in and just do a last-minute podcast? And she said, sure. So we did the Monday podcast together. I mean, talk about law of attraction, right? But it was great. And we had a good time. I learned a lot about Asperger's, and she's going to be good. She's going to be a good addition. Yeah. So we've got a lot. And there's also a fifth gentleman who has expressed interest in also doing the Thursday podcast with Drew and I. And I'm pretty sure he's going to come on. I don't want to name him just yet because I want to make absolutely certain. But, yeah, got a lot of new young blood coming onto the show, and it's going to be a good thing.
That'll be wonderful. Yeah, that's really good. I'm going to have to listen to more episodes.
Absolutely.
Finding the time to listen to a lot of podcasts is not something that I've been able to do. But if it's going to be funny, that's more interesting than anything.
And I think a lot of it's actually going to be fairly serious talk because they're all bringing really interesting topics and issues to the table. So, I mean, there will be humor involved in it, but it's mostly going to be really good topics.
Comedy, people who do comedy often have some really powerful messages.
Yes, very much so. So that's a good thing. And before we go any further, I also want to remind our listeners, if you're not yet a subscriber, you want to make sure you become a subscriber so you can catch up and hear all this stuff coming right to your smartphone when and wherever we record it. Because as soon as we record it and add it, it goes right onto the feed and it shows right in your smartphone. So become a subscriber if you haven't done that. If you need help doing that, the instructions are on our homepage at loatoday.net. There's a link for Apple users. There's another link for Android users, and there's also a third link for people who have other kinds of devices. But, of course, most people are either iPhone or Android. And, become a subscriber. You're going to love it. And if you're already an existing subscriber, or if you're becoming a new subscriber, please take a moment to share that you're listening on loatoday.net on your favorite social media channel. We've been pushing that for a while, and it's paying off. We want to really keep pushing that because we want more and more people to get that daily dose of happy. I just keep imagining, Tom, what happens when we get to the point where we have, like hundreds of thousands, millions of people getting their daily dose of happy, getting that better feeling just by listening to part or all of a podcast each day. The change is going to be incredible.
It could be very powerful. I'm totally with you on that.
And it's also a great way to introduce, law of attraction. And I mean, your topic today for us is perfect because the fundamental principles of the law of attraction, they have changed our lives, and they have the potential for changing the lives of millions, which is really what our goal is. So I'm glad you brought it up today. It's a good one.
Yeah, and it's very timely for me because I'm just sort of going back and reevaluating what I teach my clients, what principles I really find the most relevant in my own life. I know I had a brand new client yesterday, and he's a person who had some difficult background, and I felt like this is a great person to experience with the things that for me have really worked with law of attraction and with my other clients to share with him because he's so receptive. He's really needs to hear these principles in a lot of ways in his life because he has struggled a lot. And I felt that it gave me a chance in that session to really go back to the fundamentals. And that's always a good thing for me to ask my own self, what things do I sort of live by around the law of attraction that I've learned over the last 5 years of being immersed in it so much. And so that's why I thought it would make a good topic for today, since it's right on the top of my mind.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a good thing.
I thought maybe we could just go back and forth a little bit on this podcast, sharing what we each find to be the most relevant things. And,
Yeah, no, I'm willing. I mean,
see what comes up. Yeah.
I mean, give me an idea of where you're thinking about going with it, because there's lots of different directions we can go on that. So, I mean, do you have something specific in mind?
I made a list of about 15 things, and so I was just going to sort of go down the list and then see what it sparked in you as to the relevance of these things. See, because what I said in the description of today's podcast is, which things really work? Which things can you rely on? Because I found some of the things over the last 5 years I've been relying on, but have they really been the best things for me to rely on? But which things are the perennials? Which things are the evergreens?
Right.
That they continually show up as, well, you know what, no matter what, I don't care if you call me law of attraction, you call me a human being. These are the things that really are working in my life that give me stability, help me feel connected to who I really am, and they stick with me through thick and thin. Mm-hmm. These are the things that I'll always turn back to. And because I realize in just talking with this particular person, these are things that are so fundamental to my life and to his life that I can say them to him unequivocally that, this is something that I want you to practice as homework,
Right.
And one of those things for him was to make peace with where you're at, no matter what, like no matter where you're at, moment by moment, if you can somehow find a way to not let it be a thorn in your side, something that's just completely destroying your life, find a way to take a step back from it, at least a little, and say, no matter what this is, I'm going to just find a way to be a little bit less freaked out about it. I'm going to make some peace. I'm going to make some peace with this and accept the fact that right now I feel sad as heck. I feel really disappointed, or I feel really angry, whatever it is, but I'm going to accept the fact that right in this moment, that's what's going on, and now from here, what can I do to move forward from this place that I'm at right now? How do I be with this thing and make peace with it?
I agree with you. In fact, I think you're absolutely right in saying you got to start with where you are right now, because no matter how painful it is, if you can't look at that long enough to get some sense of what it feels like and what it, not just what it feels like, but why it's happening. I mean, usually we have a pretty good idea why we're feeling particularly a negative emotion of some kind. It's usually not a surprise. It's something that we already know what it is. And so it pays to take just a little time, not a lot, but just a little time to kind of examine it, ask it questions like, okay, I know that I'm angry because of X, but why am I angry because of X? I mean, what is it about X that really would make me angry? Or what is it about X that it was anger the only way that I could have reacted to it? Could I have felt differently about it? Could I have looked at it differently? Or, why wasn't I looking at it differently? What was it that was driving me? Was it because I was depending on someone else to determine what my reaction was going to be? Because, they treated me well or they treated me badly. And, because of the way they treated me, I reacted. I didn't actually choose a reaction. I just kind of went with the default. So, I mean, those are the kind of things you have to ask yourself to find out what's going on before you can do anything else to try to climb out of it.
Mm-hmm. And there's a sort of fundamental principle in the field of dealing with feelings in psychology, which is, just accept the fact that right at this moment, I'm angry and that's okay. Or right at this moment, I feel so depressed and I am crying and I feel so miserable, but that's where I'm at right at this moment. And I want out of this feeling like crazy, but to get out of that feeling, sometimes it's the biggest thing to do. The first thing to do is to quit fighting it and say, this is how I feel right now. And, if I need to cry and have a good cry, I need to have a good cry. And I need to be angry and I need to just feel frustrated right now. I'm friggin' frustrated and be with that for a little bit and accept the fact that, and that's where it leads to the second main point is for me is, in a way, is accept the fact that my emotions are my guidance system, that whatever is coming up for me, as bad as it feels, as bad as it seems, as bad as I'm even telling myself it is, which is just a story, but that's what's coming up. But my emotions, they are actually there for a good reason. And so if I'm feeling very upset, call it sadness, call it anger, call it grief, whatever you call it, there is a reason that emotion is coming up. That is actually something wonderful about my emotions. They are going to guide me to my alignment with my higher self. And therefore, I don't need to feel like they are punishment. I don't need to feel like I'm a bad person for feeling this thing. Why am I so screwed up? How come I just can't get my act together? All these blame, shame things we do, they don't really help. What really helps is feel that feeling and accept it. And then from there, it can begin to transform.
Yeah. Oh, that's very true. And when you have that kind of honesty, self-honesty, it's where you're taking your first steps to climb out of the bad place. Because you really can't climb out until you get that level of honesty going. That's really key. And once you've got it going, what you're really doing is you're connecting to the emotion. And connecting to the emotion is key. That's like fundamental when it comes to applying the law of attraction in the way you want to apply it. So I agree completely. That's definitely the thing to do.
It's actually, you could say, divine guidance, or maybe people don't like the word divine. You could just say it's your guidance system. It's something built in that's designed that way. Emotions are designed to help you be guided toward what you really want. Mm-hmm. And then there's other things like I was telling this person, for example, do you have a belief in some kind of a power, some kind of a love, some kind of an energy force that is bigger than you or is in the unseen realm that you can have some reliance on, have some faith in, have some trust in? Is there something that you trust that's bigger than your problems, that's bigger than your own sense that, I'm a human being here on the earth and I'm suffering, I'm struggling? Because that's a lot what I get is people, clients who they're suffering or struggling in one way or the other and very confused and very, somehow feeling distraught. And one thing that I always work with clients and I work with myself is let that higher power have your back. Let this love that is actually orchestrating the universe, trust in it. Trust that there is something that, for example, allows, as well as Abraham says, lets the planets spin in perfect proximity to each other. Lets the food show up on your plate. Lets your breath come in and out. Lets the sun, show up another day. Lets the air give you oxygen. All these things that are causing life to be here. Can you trust in it? And I think that's the second hugest principle besides making peace with what's coming up for you is, can you trust that there is a greater force that you do not have to feel alone here and lost and stuck in your problems?
Sure.
What do you think about that one?
I think that's true. Now, I also would want to put a caveat in. The caveat is there are some people who have various issues with religion and so forth, and I know because I was one of them and still am in many ways, who would have a little trouble with this idea of the higher power. But the good news is you don't have to think about it as a higher power if you don't want to. You can also think about it in terms of, I like the term that Abraham Hicks uses, source energy. If you think about, how was the universe created, right? What drives the universe? Why is there so much dynamic activity going on? Where does that energy come from? Well, the idea of source energy is that's the creative energy. That's the energy that created the universe. It's the energy behind all of it. And even if you don't believe that there's a single higher power behind it, you can certainly believe in energy because energy is everywhere. And it's pretty evident. It's not like it's hiding, right? It's not in the ether someplace. It's like it's right there. And you can't really avoid it. So the energy is there. And the good news is we can tap into that energy. Well, tapping into energy for somebody who is not terribly spiritual or not terribly religiously oriented is literally exactly the same as trusting in a higher power. There is no actual tangible difference, but it's a different way of looking at it for those who just have a little challenge looking at the higher power idea.
Yeah, and I have a little difficulty with just the second I say higher power, my old probably Catholic upbringing, which I no longer adhere to, it immediately goes to some concept of like that there's some big guy out there. Is there some big, I still crack up when I hear people say, God, and then they start calling it he, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, who's he? But if that's what people need, but I personally am more like you. I mean, I would much rather call it source, and I even like calling it my inner being, my inner being or my higher self, although that creates a dichotomy right away, and it's hard for me to imagine, I have a higher being and a lower being.
Right. Yeah, I often call it the other part of me. That way, it's not higher or lower. It's just it's the non-physical part of me. Because that's another key portion of Abraham teaching, which is that we are not just the physical side of us. We also have a non-physical side. And
that's why I call it the unseen realm.
Yeah, and that's a good way of describing it. The other part of us we don't see. I mean, we feel it. If you're looking for it, it's inside. Often, I mean, for me and for many people, it's a little bit of a challenge sometimes to say, I've got that connection. Where is it? I know it's in there somewhere. Where? I can't find it. But it's always there. And I don't know about you. For me, I kind of associate as being physically in my body, like between my solar plexus and my heart, somewhere in that range.
Awesome.
And I mean, it almost doesn't really matter how you visualize it, but to me, that's how I feel that connection. And there's, in my feeling, in my experience, there is a sense of infinite depth going on there. I mean, I know physically my body is, a certain width and a certain height and a certain depth and so forth. But from what you might call a more spiritual viewpoint, it does seem to go on endlessly. And I think that's really the connection to the inner being. So, to my other half, to my other side.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I have a friend who says the same thing about her sense, like when I've really probed a little bit into where does she experience this thing that other people would call God or we'd call source, higher power, and she says she really experiences it right there like you did in her heart, her heart area. I don't, I can't say that, oh yeah, it's right there. I still think of my body and everything in it as almost like just almost like a vehicle. And I don't think that serves me that well. I would prefer that I had a really strong feeling like you do, because you called it a feeling. And
I can't honestly say it's a strong feeling. It's a feeling. I mean, it's something I definitely noticed, but it's not strong for me. It's fairly weak actually, but it's very definite. It's always in the same place, and it's always, there's a particular tangible quality to it, and I don't have a label for it, but it's always that same tangible quality. Whatever that thing is. Well, so we'll call it grog. It's that grog quality.
Grog. Oh, Walt takes part in grog. Walt imbibes in grog.
No, I don't drink it.
Isn't that another word for?
Yeah, I think it is. It's an alcohol, isn't it? Yeah, maybe not the best choice in word, perhaps.
It's okay.
I'll have to work on that one.
So what's another law of attraction fundamental that you rely on that will carry you through in just any situation that is tried and true?
Well, I'm always reminded whenever I think about source energy that I came to the conclusion a long time ago, and I really do believe it to this day. Source energy is the same thing as love. And when I understand it that way, when I understand that love is the creative force and that love actually takes a tangible form in source energy, then I realize that what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to stir the love up again inside of me. Because when I'm in a really, really depressed state, the love is not flowing. I've got it blocked off entirely. And I need to get it flowing again. So literally one of my favorite things to do when I'm feeling really depressed is to do my favorite things to do. Which sounds kind of strange, but I mean, my first thing that I think of is what would I love to do right now? Forget about depression, forget about issues or relationships or money or health or whatever else that is I'm struggling with that's making me so depressed in the first place. What do I love to do? Especially something simple, something I can just do right now.
Nice.
I mean, one of my favorite things is literally to go out and walk. Just to take a long walk and get out in nature and breathe in the air and all that kind of thing. Because it inevitably makes me feel at least a little better. And usually it makes me feel quite a bit better. Especially if it's a long walk.
Yeah.
And, so that's one of my favorite things to do. And so I will go for what is the first thing I can think of that I love doing that I would be willing to do now. Not that I would necessarily love to do now, because that may be too much of a reach. But something that I know historically I have always loved doing. And even though I don't really feel like doing it right now, I can kind of push myself to do that because I have a history of loving it even when I'm not feeling good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the first things I recommended to this client yesterday was, I said, do you have any place near you? Because he lives in a very dense city and he lives in the inner city part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I said, is there any place you can go where you can be in nature?
Yeah.
And, he said, well, there's a park about a mile and a half down the street. And I said, would you be willing to go there every day that feels like a good day? Would you like that? And would you go and walk around that park one time at least, and then come back, because he has to take a bus or he has to walk a mile to get there. But, I walk often every day. I walk about a half a mile to get to my favorite open space, that's full of beautiful cottonwood trees and just wide open spaces and a pond and things like that. Because if I don't do that, I become claustrophobic inside my house, and I get to tunnel vision can start to happen where I'm just obviously spending way too much time sitting in a chair and working on my projects, where getting out and walking and being in nature like you do, it just changes my whole perspective. It gets all kinds of things changing inside me. And I'm sure scientifically that physiologists and biologists and other brain doctors could tell you all kinds of things it's doing for your serotonin and all these things that are being activated by going out and going for a walk, especially in a place where you have appreciation going on of nature,
right.
That natural appreciation. So yeah, I really agree with you. Finding something like that. I have my guitar out and I put it on a stand so that I will quote unquote force myself to pick it up and start playing. But once I do, then it's like it can change my state a lot, because I love playing and I love singing, or I love playing lead guitar. And it just takes me on a journey. It's pretty easy for me to go on that journey, and then it changes my state, just like going out into nature.
Right. Exactly. And
so these are really big things to do.
They are. And it's also really powerful to recognize that if you have a pre-existing list that you've started to put together, or maybe put together for some time, of things to do when you're not feeling up to anything, you're just feeling so down, nothing's going to make you feel better. It's so much easier to pick one when you have a written list. That's something that Patty Framo convinced me to do, to actually make a list of my favorite processes, my favorite things to do when I need a pick-me-up of some kind. And when you first sit down to do such a list, I mean, it can often be hard to think of one item to put on the list. And that's usually because you're trying to make a list when you're feeling depressed. But if you keep a written list somewhere, I mean, when I actually sat down to do it, I was in a pretty good frame of mind. I added 18 items to the list. I couldn't believe how easy it was. Now, again, I was doing it when I was feeling good, not when I was feeling down. Which was big. But it was. But
when you're feeling down, can you go to that list and pick something?
Yeah.
Do you do that?
Yeah, I have the list taped to my wall here in the office where I do the podcast. And, and this is where I spend a lot of my time anyway. So if I'm in a difficult situation, mentally or emotionally speaking, I'll look at the list and say, is there anything there that I feel like I can do right now? Just any one that I can do right now. And it helps. In fact, one of the items on the list is actually 22 items in one. 22 in one, yeah. You'll recall that at the back of the Abraham Hicks book, Asking It Is Given, there are 22 processes you can do to help improve your emotional set point. And they're actually useful to have reference to because, among other things, each process is labeled to identify what emotional states are best to be in when you use them. And if you're in a depressed state, it's the ones toward the end of that list that are best for somebody who's in a depressed state. So you can just go to a process that is directly created specifically for someone who's feeling depressed, or someone who's feeling angry, or someone who's feeling hatred or revenge or whatever, really, really deep, dark feelings. There are processes built into that book for that. And I'd forgotten that for a while until Patty, again, same person. Patty's a great life coach. When Patty recommended to me that I, check that book out again, because I had the book for years, but I hadn't looked at the processes in a long time. There are some good ones back there for somebody who's really feeling bad. Probably first and foremost is actually one of your favorites, meditation.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was one of the big ones on my list here.
Yeah.
And I can't help but working with clients with that one because it's been so influential in my life for the last 47 years, because I learned to meditate when I was 23 from a teacher who said, I want you to do this 2 hours a day, an hour in the morning, an hour at night, first thing when you get up and the last thing when you go to bed. And so for at least 25 years of my life, I did that religiously. I mean, literally religiously every day, and it always turned into an hour and 20 minutes because there's four meditation techniques that I would do every morning.
Oh,
and
wow.
I would do each of them for 20 minutes because 15 just never felt like enough. Although he said, heck, if you even only do, half an hour, at least do something. And of course, a lot of people today say, if you only do 5 minutes, to do something. And that's what I say to my clients, hey, can you do any? It's amazing how many people find so much resistance to even finding 5 or 10 minutes. But I try to really work with clients in that arena because I know that once they do some meditation and really get to the place where they, I love this one description of meditation I recently heard. It says, just flop yourself down in a chair and breathe and just do, let your mind relax, and I thought,
Not bad.
That's one form of meditation.
Yeah, sure.
And sometimes it can be one of the best because you aren't trying to meditate.
Yeah.
Sometimes when people try and say, well, okay, what technique do I have to do? And oh my God, this is hard. I experienced that all those years I was meditating. A lot of times by trying to do the technique, I found myself going, am I doing this right? Am I getting anywhere? And that doesn't work, because what really works is to get off all the expectations and get into the relaxation part of it. And that's why using your breath is often such a good thing. But even some people say, even trying to focus on your breath can be too much. Now, I find I like to have that focus often, but sometimes lately I'm using a variety of things. Like I'm even listening to guided meditations because I'm just looking for the thing that gets me into that place inside where I feel like I'm really slowing down. My thoughts are slowing down and something else is beginning to come up. They say, it sort of bubbles up from inside you. It issues forth, and it's a feeling of ease. It's a feeling of peace. It's a feeling of receptivity, and you're letting in something else. You're letting something else be there other than just this stream of thoughts,
And I agree with you, too, about how you can kind of talk yourself out of meditation, because all the rules about meditation I used to hear literally kept me away from it. I just didn't. It was too much work. It was too much effort. Like, I just can't be bothered to do that. And it wasn't until somebody pointed out to me, I think it was the breathing technique, just breathe. Sit down, calm down, and breathe for a bit. And that's meditation. I said, oh, well, okay, I can do that.
Yeah. That's why I like what the guy said, flop yourself down in a chair, close your eyes, and be still for a while.
Yep.
Just drop all your agendas for 5 minutes and 10 minutes. And just doing that once a day is helpful. It's amazing how many people I've noticed they're pretty driven, and they just don't really believe they can stop being driven by their mind and into all these things that seem so important. And it's so ironic that actually stopping being driven just for a little bit can change your whole life. It can begin to change your perspective. Meditation is so powerful in that way.
Well, that's why the simple idea of just focus on your breathing is great, because if you're a driven person and you focus on your breathing for even just a few minutes, all of that drivenness just relaxes, because the only thing you're allowing yourself to focus on is the breathing. And typically what often happens is, especially if you're really active and you have a really active mind, you sit down and you focus on your breathing for 2 seconds, and then you're off on some other tangent of some other thing you've been thinking about. And then you gently bring it back to the breathing again. And then you focus on the breathing for another 2 seconds, and now you're off on another direction. And then you gently bring it back to the breathing. And so it's a little bit of a tug of war for a bit there. But after you've done it for a few minutes, you just keep going at it and just use the same determination with the breathing as you do with anything else you're doing in your life. You get there fairly quickly. You just have to be a little patient with it.
Yeah, and I found after meditating for 47 years that one of the biggest keys to it is to let the sort of accept the fact that thoughts are always going to be there probably. So I'll just let them be more in the background, and I'm going to put my focus more on something else, so, something that's more, that's going to lead me to a more peaceful place so that's why breath, or for example, I have a ringing in my ears. What people would call it tinnitus, but to me, it's a gift because it's something I can always listen to, and it'll take me right to a place of a lot more peace inside because it isn't my thoughts. It's this high ringing sound. So, some people have certain music that they listen to, and of course the old traditional thing, watch a candle flame. And there are many things, many ways to meditate, but breath is so great because breath is the first thing that comes into us when we're born, and it's the last thing apparently that leaves when we leave our bodies. So it is, and there's many spiritual traditions say that within the breath lies the essence of who you really are. That is your infinite self is actually in that breath. And when it comes in the body and when it leaves, that's where you are, you're in that breath. And so I like the understanding that, wow, when I focus on my breath, I'm actually focusing on something that is much more than I can imagine.
Yeah, that's right. I also was glad to find out this year that this is the first time I ever found out about. There's a thing called a walking meditation, which I had never heard of.
Yeah.
And when it was described to me, I can't even remember which co-host it was, but one of them described to me what a walking meditation was. And when she described it to me, I realized I'd been doing it for years and not realizing I was meditating.
Okay.
I didn't even know that it was a form of meditation, and it was something I'd already been doing. Because literally, what I have a tendency to do, particularly when stuff's getting to me and I just need to take a break and get away from it, I'm not the kind of person who goes in the kitchen to get a cup of coffee. Instead, I gotta pace. And literally, as I pace, I didn't realize I was doing this consciously, but I've always done this kind of, below my conscious awareness. I shake my hands. I shake my arms to shake off whatever it is that's really bugging me at that particular moment. And I didn't even know I was doing it until she described to me what a walking meditation is. That she literally described it as shaking it off. I said, but I do that. I said it with surprise, I've been doing that for years. She says, oh, well, you're doing a walking meditation. I said, I am? Really? So it was, I kind of was doing it naturally, right? It was like, it was like a dog or a cat shaking because they got water on them or something like that.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing. Shaking the bad juju away, the bad energy away that's really pissing the hell out of me. Just shake it right off. That's what I do. I pace around. My wife makes jokes about how we need a bigger house so I can have a longer pathway, a longer hallway to pace in. And it's probably true,
Yeah, that'd be fun. Well, it's so funny you say that. I think we talked about this in other podcasts, but that, I studied shamanism for a long time, and one of the main medicine forms that shaman use is shaking, and they literally shake themselves into that altered state, and it is it's a powerful thing. There was a period where I was trying it a lot, and I was doing a lot of shaking to some pretty powerful music that was coming from Africa that I had on this CD from the Bushmen of Africa, who they go into all their trances through shaking, and
really?
They get fire going at night, and the shaman, and they dance around, but they shake, and they shake really violently. They let their whole bottom part of their body just start vibrating until it takes them into a trance, and then they fall over and and they go on these journeys, these amazing, they said these ropes drop down from the sky, and they climb up these ropes, and then they go and they say they have conversations with what they call the great God, and they talk to ancestors. They bring back healings for the village. If someone's got an illness or something, they bring back, the knowledge of what herbs that person needs and how to prepare the herbs and all kinds of things. So, and they get that into that state, as do many shaman all over the world through shaking. And so there was this period where I was doing that. And this one night I was in bed, and I was just my legs were just going crazy, moving and shaking. And I fell asleep, and I then had a dream that was the most lucid dream of my entire life. I might have talked about this in another show, but I had this experience with this bird woman kind of that came to me, and I went into this state of love that was so powerful that I knew for the first time in my life what love actually was. It was like, oh, dang, love is actually this thing that is so powerful that it literally changed my entire body and mind, and it woke me up. And for 15 minutes, I was in this state of such bliss and such peace and I could feel my heart healing. I could feel my whole body healing. It was just pulsating through my whole body. And the only way I could describe it was just pure, unadulterated love of the highest caliber that I could ever imagine. And I have experienced similar things, like with this woman I've been dating. Sometimes I experience things similar with her, but that experience showed me that this shaking medicine, this thing of shaking actually probably has a lot more in it than we know. And of course, Western people don't even know about it because we generally don't practice these indigenous, practices.
Right. Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily tell people that shaking is one of the best LOA things you can do, but
no,
it maybe is.
Well, no, I was just amazed that there was something I've been doing all my life and not realizing it was meditative. I mean, I always thought that, like I said earlier, I was not terribly religious. I kind of gave up religion at age 14. And from that point on, I considered myself to not only be not religious, but not believe in God, and not to believe in afterlife or anything else like that. I was just a complete doubter. And yet here I was engaging in a meditative process all those years, and I didn't know it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. So, there's so many things.
There are a lot of labels we get tied up on, and it's nice to know that there are ways to not get tied up on them and get the benefit out of the stuff that's behind it. That's the way I look at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's good, especially in this day and age, because there seems to be a melting of people's dependence on religion, people's dependence on ritual and ceremony that doesn't really have content to it, doesn't really get you where you want to get to.
Right.
But everybody they just keep doing it, but because the church said to do it for the last 500 years, but it doesn't necessarily get you where you want to get to.
Yeah, and never really did a whole lot for me, I have to say. But other things do, and that's really the best thing. I mean, you are asking about processes that we can do, various things, activities, and whatever we can do to help get out of that bad feeling place that we're in. And one of my favorites is music. The reason I mention music particularly is I like you, was a musician in my younger days, played in bands and so forth. And I actually gave up playing music earlier on in my life, mainly because most of the music that we ended up playing, because we were a cover band. Actually, I was in a few cover bands. And
yeah, I was too.
Yeah, and when you're in cover bands, well, that's what you do. You cover other people's music. Well, most of the music that's out there is pretty darn depressing. I mean, you listen to the music. Some of the music is very upbeat, but you listen to the lyrics. Oh God! I mean, you start, and of course you're singing those lyrics. I was more of a backup singer than anything, but you start singing those lyrics over and over again, and it's doing a number on your mind. So, I mean, that's really why I had to give it up after a while. But after I got involved with the law of attraction and trying to figure out, okay, how do I get myself into that better feeling place? Because that's really what we want. We want to be in the better feeling place so we can attract better the stuff that we want. Well, okay, I knew what the mission was. How do I get there? And I thought about the music, and at first I just said, well, I can't go there because the music's so negative. But I also remembered at one point that there are some songs that actually have, fairly positive messages to them. And so, I took advantage of smartphones and took my iPhone and started putting together a list of my favorite positive music. And it took a while. I mean, the first time I tried to do it, I think it came up with 7 songs. It wasn't a real long list. But over time, oh yeah, how about that song? So I'd add that song. And oh yeah, how about that one? I'll add that one. And now I've got, 60, 70 songs on the list. And I'll play that, like on one of my walks or if I'm driving around or something. And it helps. It's another way of getting myself into a better feeling place just by hearing these songs that I like that have positive messages or a good feeling about them. Some sort of positive association. And they're kind of an eclectic mix. I mean, it's not like one particular genre or something like that. But I don't care because it makes me feel better, and that's all that really matters. So I thoroughly recommend everybody, think about what songs that you feel have a positive message, that feel good to you, and start making a list of them. Take advantage of the way smartphones work and make yourself a playlist, and then just, play your playlist periodically. It definitely helps to get you in a better feeling place.
Good. Yeah, another one that I use a lot, and I noticed I was using with this client, is to start thinking of every moment as a brand new beginning. There's one, saying that every second is a second chance. And I thought that was pretty cool when I heard it, that every moment, this is an intellectual thing, but intellectual things actually help me, because I found that I can actually, not that I want them to override my emotional guidance system, because I think my emotions are where the real change takes place, that really then I feel it in my whole body. And the more I feel the change in my whole body, the more I start living from that place of ease. I start living from that place of, I just feel good. Well, that just seems to be my default state, but that's arrived at through allowing myself to let my emotions guide me to that place. But this is using my mind to just say, if there's these stories I tell myself about my past and how messed up I am, or when am I ever going to get what I want in my life? When am I ever going to be, have the relationship I want, have the money I want, have the house I want, or whatever we tell ourselves. But then to realize that every moment is a brand new beginning in terms of quantum physics. Every moment is malleable new beginning, that anything is actually possible. And when I start realizing that it's a quantum universe where it's all up to the observer, it's up to me what I'm expecting, what I'm imagining is possible, that's going to determine the way things are unfolding. So let each moment be brand new is a pretty powerful way to imagine life is actually happening.
It does take a shift in attention, doesn't it? Because whenever we're in that bad feeling place, our attention is always drawn back to whatever that causes of that bad feeling. Whatever the
or
experience
the fear
was.
of the future.
Or the fear of the future, yeah. They're both bad feelings. It's true.
Yeah.
In fact, that was something Joel and I talked about during yesterday morning's podcast, about how if you are in any way experiencing something from a time-related viewpoint, whether it be from the past or the future, you're in the wrong place, because you need to be in the now. So that's like the clue. The moment that you notice that you're thinking about something that could be in the future, or something that you experienced in the past that wasn't comfortable, or feeling frustrated that the future isn't coming fast enough, or whatever, is the moment that you're not focused in the now. And until you're focused in the now, you really won't get anywhere. Getting to the now is the place to be if you want to get somewhere, because that's where it all happens.
Right. You're always going to be in the now. And if you really think about it, there is really no past and no future, because you can't really go 1 second into the past, and you can't really go 1 second into the future. You're always going to be right here. And so it's sort of like accepting the fact that, so this is almost like an eternal moment, and I'm just always creating in this moment. In a sense, I'm allowing, and then if you combine with that, let source have your back, then you're sort of in this moment, trusting that there's this wonderful, loving, benevolent, benign universe that's got your back. And even though shit happens, stuff comes up, you're well taken care of. And that's a powerful way to begin to look at your life. And it's a choice you can make.
Yeah, it takes some time when you're doing this deliberately for you to get enough experiences, enough pieces of evidence put together to recognize that the universe has your back. Yes. But the more that you focus on staying or the more that I focused, I should put it this way, the more that I focused on staying in the now and focused on what was going on right now that was good in my life, that's another favorite process of mine. If I'm feeling bad, I want to take my mind off the thing that I'm feeling bad about. Well, one of the best ways to do that is to say to myself, okay, well, I don't like that. I don't like X. X is really, really, really bothering me. But what is going on in my life these days that I do like? Because there's always something, and if you can't think of anything, go back to basics. The basics are, do you have food on the table? Do you have a roof over your head? Do you have clothing on your back?
Oxygen in your lungs?
Do you have oxygen in your lungs? Absolutely. I mean, the basics are still there. We forget about them when we're in a bad
really
spot.
Powerful basics.
They are.
Yeah,
But
and that leads to the one of appreciation, is what you're describing.
That's true. Yes, that is appreciation, and it's or at least it's the very early stages of appreciation. Recognizing that there's something else going on besides this horrible X that I've been dealing with.
Right.
And I don't mean X person. I mean just letter X.
Yeah. What are the things that, in spite or even within the situation you're in, no matter how bad it seems to be, what are some things you can appreciate about where you're at?
And it can take practice. I mean, I remember the first time Louise and I did this little game. We would do this at the end of the day, and we still do periodically, is we'll ask each other, what are 3 good things that happened today? If you had a day where you had stuff going on that you didn't like, the first few times you try that can take a long time to come up with even one good thing that happened that day. You know what I mean?
Well, when you're really, really in a place that you feel pretty bad, yeah.
Yeah, it can take a while. But if you stick with it, you can say, well, okay, yeah, I guess one good thing happened today it was kind of basic, but I had a good breakfast. It seems so small, right? It seems so insignificant to this terrible thing that happened all day long. But it really isn't. Because the more that I focus on the breakfast, the less that I'm focusing on the terrible thing that went on. And that is where the shift takes place. Mm-hmm. It's in refocusing.
There's just so many ways you can appreciate, even when you're in a really bad place. If you, like I use this appreciation journal, and sometimes when I'm in a really difficult place, I'll get it out and I'll start writing things then about what I'm experiencing. And I'll say, so what about how bad this feels to me is actually working out for me? What are the good qualities of this that are leading me to the next better feeling place, or that are opening my heart, or that are, helping me feel my feelings and, processing stuff that I've been needing to process for a really long time. And now it's finally getting out in the open, and now I can finally feel it. And so there's ways to find appreciation about all kinds of things that are even that we would call so-called negative things.
Absolutely.
Because it's sort of like that's what one of the best things about contrast is finding the silver lining or what is good about the particular thing that's the contrast. It's the yin and the yang. You can't have light without darkness. So what can you appreciate about the darkness? Well, in the darkness I can rest. In the darkness I can close my eyes and not have to be worried about what's going on in the light.
Right.
I mean, there's just different ways that we can find solace in everything, one way or the other, and not always feel like there's horrible things that I always have to flee from.
Right. Yeah. And what we're ultimately trying to do is refocus, change our focus away from the thing that's bugging us. Because as strange as it sounds, when we are able to finally just, if necessary, rip ourselves away from it and focus on anything else that feels better, and anything, no matter how inconsequential it may seem, no matter how it may seem to have absolutely no impact on whatever that terrible thing is that we're dealing with, just the act of taking our attention away from that terrible thing and focusing on something that is better helps us to feel better about the thing. Because we're no longer so fixated on how horrible it is. It's the fixation
over and over again. Yeah.
That fixation is what kills us. That fixation is what ties us down. It's what ties our hands behind our backs because we become so fixated on that horrible thing that's going on. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to break that focus of concentration on, oh God, I really hate that thing that's going on. Because, as we all know from the law of attraction, if I continue to focus on, oh, I really hate that thing that's going on, I am guaranteed to get more of, oh, I hate that thing that's going on.
They call it rumination, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're just ruminating over it again and again and again and again, and that actually is never going to really get you out of it. And sometimes we think that by focusing on the problem again and again and again, something's going to change, but we've talked about that many podcasts, like how can you tell the bad feeling story again and again and again and expect that you're going to get into a better feeling place?
Right. I believe they call it insanity.
Yeah.
So anyway, this has been good. Really, really good discussion here, and we've been breaking ground because we just did our first live stream broadcast on Facebook while we're doing the podcast. So this has been a very good day. Breaking ground. Before we leave, I want to remind people once again, subscribe if you're not yet a subscriber. The instructions are at the homepage, loatoday.net. And Tom, how does somebody reach out to you for a little quick coaching?
They can go to my website, which is youarejoy. That's the 3 words, youarejoy.com. And sign up there for a free half hour of coaching with me where we'll take a look at what's going on in your life and how I might be able to help you.
Sounds great. All right. Tom, it's been a pleasure. I look forward to talking to you next week.
Wonderful, Walt. Have a great week.
Yep, I will do that. We hope that you have a good time and a good, enjoyable week, and keep joining us next time as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.